Hi, I'm Talia from Little House on Laurel. Today we're going to talk about how to preserve herbs from your garden and also how to store your dried herbs in mason jars. I'm going to give you the benefits of storing your herbs in mason jars as well as the best practices and things that you want to avoid. Summer is the season of gardening and farmers markets, which is the best time, of course, to gather herbs to dry and preserve. I've been growing a garden for many years, but it's just been in the past few years that I actually started preserving my herbs by drying them and storing them in canning jars. This has been awesome because I've been able to freshly pick my herbs and then dry them immediately after picking, so they've maintained their freshness. And so I know that when I go to use them in the fall, winter, and spring, they're going to be at their best. I do, of course, love to use fresh herbs, but I feel like using my dried herbs straight from my garden instead of buying fresh herbs from the market in the middle of winter. I just think that I'm getting better nutrition and flavor. It's also a little easier on the pocketbook. I am a huge fan of mason jars, and if you want, you can go check out my video for mason jar pantry organization and how to stay stocked up on essentials. I think you'll enjoy that one if you like mason jar organization as well. Let's first talk about the steps for gathering your herbs and drying them before we talk about how to store them in mason jars. Most herbs are best harvested on a sunny morning after the dew has lifted. But if this doesn't work for your schedule, say you leave really early in the morning for work or to take your kids to swim lessons or something, it's better to harvest your herbs anytime than not at all. But you want to, when you're harvesting, look for leaves that are free of disease or signs of bugs and bug damage. Also, there are certain herbs that usually like the flowering kind, like calendula and chamomile, that you want to harvest them during the middle of the day when the flowers are wide open. Now, of course, if you're buying your herbs from the farmer's market, then you don't need to worry about this step. You'll just bring those fresh herbs home. And then we'll move on to the next step, which is to wash your herbs if necessary. It's not always necessary to wash your herbs, and it's actually helpful if you don't have to because they'll have less moisture to begin with, and it will make the drying process easier. If you see visible dirt, then you'll want to take the time to wash your herbs first. Definitely with delicate herbs like flowers, again, you don't want to wash them because that can cause them to fall apart easily. Okay, after you've washed your herbs, if needed, you'll move on to drying them. And there are many different methods of drying your herbs. You can hang them in a bundle to dry, which I did for a couple of years before I invested in a good dehydrator. You can dry them at a low temperature on a baking sheet in the oven or in the dehydrator. You can also even air dry them in a single layer on a tray or a wide basket. Herbs are ready to be stored when they are completely dry, and they'll crumble when you run their leaves between your palms. If they're not to this point, you want to continue drying because you don't want any moisture in them, or you'll have the possibility of them molding or going bad. Some herbs like basil or mint, those leafy herbs that have big leaves, you can just pick the leaves and dry the leaves. However, with items like oregano and parsley, it's usually best to cut the entire stem off, and I dehydrate the stem with the leaves. So once that's all dehydrated, then you need to remove the leaves. This can be done by grabbing the top of the stem with one hand, and with the other hand making a circle with your thumb and your index finger, and then sliding that down the stem. Once you've removed the leaves, you'll want to either crush the herbs by hand or with a food processor. or you'll leave the leaves whole for long-term storage. So if you are planning on storing for a year or two, then you definitely want to leave them whole because they will last a lot longer that way. Only crush what you would need for about 3 months. Now you're ready to fill and label your jars. Using a wide mouth funnel, you'll fill a clean mason jar with your dried herbs and then screw on an airtight lid. Labeling your jars is essential, especially for herbs that look almost identical when they're crushed. Basil, parsley, oregano, they all look very similar when they're crushed. I absolutely love my embossed labeler that I bought off of Amazon. I've labeled all of my jars here, as well as my jars for my pantry organization using this, and it's super easy and it looks a lot nicer than my handwriting. So I'll link that for you in the description box. Now for storage, for culinary herbs that I'm going to be cooking with in the next few months, I have the shelf behind me next to the stove, and I will keep these small jars right here of crushed herbs that I know I'm going to need, so they have easy access while I'm cooking. However, for any medicinal type herbs, like the ones that I use for my herbal teas, or herbs that I'm going to be storing for longer term, I will put those in a cupboard or a drawer or a pantry where it's dark and dry and cool, so that it will preserve them longer. It's not good for herbs to be in direct sunlight. A couple of facts about storing dried herbs. Is it better to store herbs in plastic or glass? The answer is always glass, because with food storage, you don't want any chemicals from the plastic leaching out into the food or the herbs. And that's why mason jars are so great. How long do herbs last in mason jars? They can last from 1 to 3 years, but there are several factors that come into play. Like I already said, if they're stored in a dry, dark, cool place, they will last a lot longer than if they're in the sun or near a heat source. And then also, if you leave them whole rather than crushing them, they will last longer. Here are some of the benefits of storing your dried herbs in jars. First of all, it prevents oxygen from getting into the herbs because they're airtight. Oxygen impacts the herbs because it starts to break the nutrients down over time. My favorite thing about mason jars, I think, is just that they're really great for organization. You can easily see what's inside the jars, how much you have left, and this helps to prevent waste and helps you know when it's time to go get more or to grow more or stock up on it. The mason jars are always so easy and fun to label. Another great thing about using mason jars is that they're reusable. Unlike when you buy spices from the grocery store and they come in those little plastic containers, once you're done, they usually just get tossed into the garbage. But with these, once they're empty, you can use them for something else, or you can just refill them again. Like for my thyme and rosemary, I ran out of those this winter. So I got to make sure I dry more this summer. All right, so best practices for storing dried herbs in jars. You want to make sure that before you store the herbs that they're dried completely, which I did already talk about. Otherwise, they will have moisture in them and they will go bad quickly. And then we have also talked about keeping the leaves whole. The herbs will keep more of their flavor and their nutritious value if you wait to crush them until you're ready to use them. And I am not going to crush them every time that I need to go and use a spice while I'm cooking. That's why I kind of have the rule that I have enough for about 3 months that's already crushed that I can just grab right by the stove. All of my longer term storage I keep whole, and I will crush those when it's time to refill these little jars. The next thing is keeping them out of direct sunlight. Now I love having a sunny kitchen, but unfortunately it's not the best thing for your dried herbs because it will cause the nutrients to break down more quickly. And so for long-term storage, you want to keep them in a cupboard, a cabinet, or a pantry. And then for all medicinal herbs, you want to keep them in a cool, dark place as well, because their potency is essential for maximum effectiveness. Heat and humidity will both impact the quality of dried herbs. So you want to aim to store them in a cooler area of the house, and then never store them in a bathroom or anywhere that may experience high humidity. And be sure to keep them away from any heat sources like a wood stove. Well, I still have my work cut out for me this summer. I have been slowly gathering different herbs, and I will continue to do that until my jars are full for the winter. I still have some mint that I need to gather, and thyme and rosemary. One hint that I have is, instead of trying to gather all the herbs at the end of the summer before it gets cold and everything dies, just try to do it over time throughout the summer. Maybe set aside one morning a week that you're going to go out there and pick a different herb and then dry it. This just helps it to not be overwhelming, and you make sure that you're picking everything at its prime and not just because you have to, because everything's about to get killed by frost. It's also just, for me, it's a really peaceful time to be out there in the mornings, snipping off the stems or the flowers and being grateful for the beautiful garden I have, and that I can use all of this bounty in my cooking and my herbal teas throughout the whole year. I really hope that this was informative and beneficial to you. I would love for you to comment and let me know if you are storing your herbs in mason jars and how your herb garden is going this year, and if you have any good tips for me. I will link to my full blog post in case you want to review anything I've said today. And I will also link to my mason jar pantry organization video. Please come back soon. I have new content every week with farm fresh recipes and simple living ideas to help you in your journey to a healthy and happy home. See you later.